Hey, welcome to the Spoon Podcast. My name is Mike Wolf, and I'm your host. Today's guest is Carl-Emil Grøn, the CEO and co-founder of Reshape Biotech. In this conversation, we talk about how Carl-Emil was first pretty skeptical about this whole idea of how AI can help biotech and how he really changed his mind pretty quickly. And now he hopes to open source this product in the future to really help biotech catch up with all the other industries with regards to how data is shared and how fast progress can move, especially with regards to using AI. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know I did, so let's get to it.
This podcast is part of the Spoon Podcast Network, home of smart conversations that feed your mind.
All right, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, so I'm Carl-Emil Grøn. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Reshape Biotech.
And Carl, it's great to catch up with you. I've known a little bit about you guys, but I'm learning more and more as we're entering this unique moment within the U.S. I'm kind of calling it the Maha moment as big food companies have to kind of reconfigure what their recipes are. I've obviously been watching how AI is transforming food system and food discovery over the past 3 or 4 years, but you guys have a unique place in the marketplace. Tell us a little bit about Reshape.
Yeah, so let me take you all the way back to where this started. So I was in university, right? And I was really curious about the world of biotech. And I had these two great friends who was building another project with. And they were building this tiny little robot for one of the professors at one of our biotech institutes. And I think for a year, I told them it was a waste of time. I was sure this was not something anybody would need. But then I started getting a little bit curious about it. And I think what really surprised me and what I discovered is that while we have self-driving cars and we have AI tools that can do crazy things out there, the world of biotech is still very manual. And when you look at the workflows, they look kind of like 1990, so like maybe 100 years old.
It was stuck in time.
It feels like it's stuck in time, but I feel like the tech branch is just evolved into two different streams, right? So what we set out to build and what we built and supply our customers with today are these standardized automation tools that help you do your research and your science, and then use AI and machine learning to figure out what's happening in my experiments. And I think this moment right now is super interesting for us in multiple different ways. So a lot of the companies have been used to using artificial flavors or coloring or stuff like that. Yeah. They now need to branch into the natural world. And that looks very much like microbiology research being done at these huge corporations today. But that needs to move its way into the whole food industry. So now they need to look for thousands of combinations of things. And that's where Reshape really shines, because we can do this really fast and we can use AI to actually get really great insight out of it.
So we'll dive into the specifics of it and how this is going to potentially be a big game changer for people doing research in the lab. But you were skeptical. And I read your story, your interview with TechCrunch, I think from a year ago when you raised your funding. Tell us a little bit about that discovery. You started kind of talking to people who are in the space of biotech. You were more of an engineer, and you just decided that this type of research needed to be more engineering centric.
Yeah. So I come from a background in physics. I studied astrophysics during my bachelor's, and then I did another degree in mechanical engineering. And I think there you're very tightly intertwined with the whole world of software and electronics engineering, and we're seeing all this new crazy tech come out, like the 2010s. So I just had the same assumption in my mind that biology and biotech must be the same, right? I assume that they were on the same path as everybody else. And while we're seeing this explosion here, I uncovered my two friends here doing this small side project. We were actually building a tiny rocket at the time, which was another fun project. But they were building that, and I thought it was it's a relatively simple product. It pours liquid into a spiral. It can handle high viscosity liquids. And I just assumed stuff like this had to exist for the world of biotech. So when I saw it, I just got so surprised by the fact that they were building this and they were selling it to someone who was actually willing to pay real money for it. And at that point, I just got so curious.
So the light bulb went off and you thought maybe we can apply more of this discipline of engineering and kind of automation and AI to biotech discovery, because like you said, you were surprised when how far back in time they were or how technology hadn't really arrived to make things easier yet.
Yeah, and I think it took me 2 years maybe to actually truly realize and appreciate the scope of it. I think there's such a big difference here, more than probably any other industry in the world. You have some companies that you can probably mentally compare to Silicon Valley. And you have some that you can compare to Germany, where you still fax documents. Maybe putting it a bit on the edge, right? But you have companies that are fully digitalized. They understand the value of getting great data, so you can use machine learning and AI to actually get great products out there in the market. And then on the other hand, you have companies who are doing billions worth of research, but all the data is being stored in paper formats or notebooks or people's brains where you just have this one guy who's been there for 50 years who just knows all the ins and outs of this specific organism. So I think the world of biotech is in the early baby steps of understanding like how valuable the data in and of itself is. And I think if we ever want to get to a future where we like believe AI can do something dramatically different, we need to have so much amazing data out there, just stored in some simple way or manner that we can actually use this to build on top of.
Can you spend a little bit of time to help people listening to the podcast to visualize what your product is? Because I was looking at it, you actually, a year ago, you had one size, a piece of hardware, but also then you had all the obviously associated software and AI tools to it. But can you explain what you're selling to people so they can get a better idea what this is?
Yeah, so if you want to visualize a product, basically look at small plates, look like it's a petri dish. They're about, you have to do the conversion here, but they're about like 9 centimeters in diameter. That's probably like 2.5 inches or something. And in this petri dish, you have an experiment ongoing, which might be a microbe, it might be an insect, it might be a bunch of different things. And then what we look at and what we try to investigate is how do these things change and behave over time? So to give you an example of like something that's very prominent today is possibly like preservatives in food. Whenever you have a piece of food, you want to make sure that it doesn't turn moldy after 5 days. And what we do here is then we add a preservative to that food, and then we try to test by inoculating, like putting in specific fungi or molds or bacteria, and then see at what point in time do these start to grow. That's basically to simulate a piece of food in your kitchen, laying on your kitchen counter, and then we simulate that, and we can start figuring out like which natural preservatives are going to work the best for preserving my food. I think the device that we have is it's a camera device where we capture pictures of these things. And then we use more than 40 million images, which is in our database, to then build an AI model that can predict and understand the experiments that you're running to give you better and smarter insights around how to design your product. And then ideally, like how do you get your product out there to the consumer? I think these are like some of the less known facts, but in order to get like a new biological product to market, you usually spend between 10 and 20 years. It's an extremely long time frame. The average cost of this is about $150 million. So whenever you hear about like these new biological products coming to market, it is through intense research and resources that have been invested. And what we help them do
you're
is
compressing that time. You're cutting the time down, and you're allowing people to basically increase the amount of research you're doing and kind of insight by 10x. Can you talk a little bit about how you're just allowing people to be more productive in the lab?
I think like what I care the most about and what Reshape is all about, right, is that if we look at the world today, so many of our goods come through biological products. It's like all your personal care, it's all your food, it's all your medicine, it's all the plants growing on your fields, right? It is such a valuable asset to the entire world. The fact that it's taking so long to engineer these different things is a bit of a travesty. Because when we look towards the climate issues or our health issues in our society, I think a lot of them will be alleviated by the fact that we have amazing biological products that we can get out there. And we just believe that we need to speed that up so much faster.
So can you compare and contrast like what someone in the lab might have done like 10 years ago versus what they're doing today with your tool set, right? Can you talk like, how does it change the game for them? I mean, are they just like, does it change the amount of people that are in the lab, or can just one person just be like infinitely more productive? What does it look like?
Yeah, so I think I have this one example where I can't mention the business. I think that's a little bit boring, but we are very often considered like a company secret. But we have this one company that used to do between like 800 and 1,000 experiments per year, whereas with our platform, they're running more than 450,000 every single year. So you get this like complete step change difference in how much you can actually do. So we just allow these companies to screen, like hundreds of times more than they ever could in the past. This means that you actually get much better products out in the market. And for an individual scientist, this means that instead of sitting and spending, 8 hours a day, either just counting bacterial colonies or measuring their size or scoring, what's the health of my insect, they have to spend right about 0 seconds doing that, and they can just go straight to the results. And because we have now so much data accumulated, we are starting to give deeper insights into that. So basically just like jumping ahead of multiple steps. We still need people in the lab. Like almost all companies we're seeing wants to run more experiments rather than less. And I think it will stay that way for a long time because we still need much more data before we can start really utilizing AI.
And you're coming along at an interesting time in the world of food, I think, which is what we follow pretty closely here at the Spoon, in that, we're it's kind of like this Maha moment, I guess you could say, in the US, where, the new administration is asking big food brands to say, hey, we want to eliminate food dyes. We want to kind of eliminate maybe certain sorts of sugar, et cetera. And then there's the tariffs. It's just a really complex and dynamic time. And it seems like it's forcing big food brands to kind of reevaluate what their ingredient lists look like. And so they probably need tools like this to help them do that. Can you talk to like what this is doing to your business?
Yeah. So I think, like, first of all, you really have to appreciate the difference moving from like artificial compounds and ingredients to natural ones. Like, natural ones usually cannot maintain color as well as the artificial ones. We expect there to be changes in texture, the color, what it looks like. And that is such a massive part of so many different products. I think both Mars, Kellogg, a bunch of these companies have tried for many years to swap out the artificial ingredients for natural ones, but they face a lot of challenges. Either because you don't get the same texture, you don't get the same taste, you don't get the same color. And that is just such an important part of a lot of these brands. Nowadays, they're gonna have to do it right. Like, when regulatory pressure comes to push, you have to do it. So I think a lot of these companies are starting to get on the wave that they have to do something radically different. Like, the methods they've used in the past are no longer going to be viable. And I think for Reshape, that's great business for us, thankfully, because we open up the door for a lot of these companies to start screening and monitoring a lot more combination than was ever possible before. I think that, you think about this example, right? Before, you had maybe one artificial coloring, and you could vary that in different strengths. If you want to do this through natural means, you might have 5 or 10 different ingredients going into it, and you need to test a bunch of variations. And as soon as you have 5 different things where you can vary all 5 quite granularly, you get so many combinations that it becomes almost an impossible problem. And I think the important part here is also, when you start utilizing AI and machine learning, you can also start optimizing how you run these experiments. So instead of just running them like brute force, you can use a lot of different new models that we can enable and apply to these specific problems, which I think is really exciting.
Can you talk to how you guys see yourself among your peer group of companies bringing new tools, particularly on the AI side, to accelerating food discovery? I just wrote a quick piece yesterday about how Shiru, which is using AI to help discover new plant-based food building blocks, is doing some interesting stuff. There's other folks doing stuff further down the supply chain, whether that's at retail or whatever. Do you guys see yourself as kind of a unique entrant? Where do you see yourself in the broader space?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to a lot of the different products or like AI things out there, a lot of new stuff is coming, and we think that's really exciting. Like, we believe this is one of the most important problems to be working on in this century. So we just welcome anybody else into this field. I think what we offer that nobody else can do is that we can start looking at things in the more applied way. A lot of things are focused around like protein engineering or designs of specific building blocks. We can look at the things in combination and in a larger scale. I think that's where it becomes really exciting. And I think we have a quite strong edge here, because we are probably the only company with the data set that enables us to look at so many different variables and so many different things that I at least haven't seen anybody who has the same technology as us and are close to being able to do what we can do.
Others within the broader kind of lab automation space, like Singer and Inner Science, but you guys, you see yourself as kind of offering a fuller platform?
Yeah, so the pitch that we come to customers with is that we are like the one-stop shop here. We don't require somebody to be a technical operator that can understand how to code or how to extract the data from their data, the insights from their data. We provide as much information as we possibly can in one simple platform. I think my personal favorite product in the world is a microwave. And my investors fucking hate when I say this.
It's a great product. Everyone loves microwave.
but it's like, microwaves are so fucking amazing. You put whatever food in there. Like, the microwave does not give a fuck. It does not care. Sorry for the swearing.
It's okay.
The microwave does not care at all about what you put in there. You turn the dial and it's going to heat it up. And I think that is the same methodology we want to get to the market, is that we have a device where you just put stuff in the microwave, you turn it on, and you get the right data and the right insights out. And I think our customers
the lab insight and automation tool that is microwave simple. You just put it in and you get insights out.
That's a dream for us, at least. And I think that's very different.
It's not a bad dream. Talk a little bit about your data, because you talked about like all these massive amounts of data you can gather for your clients, but you also sounds like you have a big and growing data set that you've put together. Are you gathering data from all your different clients and putting it into a large model that is then helping to kind of make your system smarter over time? Or talk a little bit about how you're building your data.
So I think like in the early days, we got permission from a lot of people to train and cross that data. Nowadays, that has been closed down mostly. But what we do have is right upstairs, we have a massive lab. We're running millions of experiments for the sole purpose of just building better models. I think the throughput in the lab is pretty insane. Yeah, I don't think anybody has something that's really like very close to what we can do. And I think that just gives us a massive edge because we're screening like so many different compounds, experiments, and different types of things, which I don't think no one company has the same capability as us.
So you have this massive lab where you're just putting tons of different food building blocks or different kind of materials through and kind of scanning it and then documenting it. And then you have intelligence about it, to which your AI can then leverage. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, like it's right upstairs, right? If you want to, I can share you afterwards. But basically, it's a huge lab, and then we have a series of our own robots that we use to basically design, track, and measure all of the experiments that we can possibly think of in a bunch of different avenues. And we get all the metadata around that, and we then use that metadata to train models to be able to understand, like, what if I design my experiment to be this? Do we have an intuition about how's this experiment going to turn out? And can we suggest which things would be better to test if we're looking for a specific outcome? So if I'm looking to preserve a specific type of food, we can basically use a model to just look at what's the chemical composition of something that we already have in the lab, and can we find similarities and overlap here? I think that's a really, really exciting future where you can start like predicting which things will work well, because that's ideally going to cut down like half to a whole year in product development for these companies.
I would imagine also some of the, for example, food dye work, you're probably building a fairly big database around that, and then you're able to leverage that. So you see areas of activity where there's a lot of interest, you have that data, and it just continues to grow and get stronger. And so the turnaround could probably be faster.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're also just very efficient at running a bunch of experiments. And I think that's a massive plus, because then we can also just beef up our data set if we need to. But yeah, it's really exciting, and I don't think anybody else is doing what we are doing here. I think that's my dream, maybe to one day like open source all of this data and just make it available for the world. Because I do think the world needs something like this, where you have data readily accessible around a bunch of different things that go into your products. If we ever want to see like a revolution in biology like we did in software, I think things need to be much more open than they are today.
So do you think that you will do that? I mean, you think that you would possibly open source it, kind of be like the Linux of biotech discovery in a sense?
It's kind of my dream, but of course I have a company to think about as well.
You have investors as well.
Yeah. But if you look at the world of software engineering, nothing or something definitely happened when you had mainframe computers, but software engineering exploded when you started getting stuff like GitHub. And through GitHub, you then have these open repositories, you have these really cool frameworks and building blocks that everybody in the world can just latch onto and then start building upon. And right now we're seeing this huge transformation in software engineering as well, where models trained on this data can then allow people with no coding experience to actually make great products. And I think we're going to probably see a similar trend in the world of biology over the next 50 years. I think we just want to be at the forefront at it.
I did a little bit of looking into the D-side movement about a year or two ago, but this idea of kind of decentralized research, it's not exactly perfectly analogous with open source, but it definitely seems like over time we can move towards democratizing and opening up a lot of this knowledge set. And so that seems like something you're definitely interested in.
Yeah. So it's I think this is such an interesting topic. So I can go on for this for the next 40 minutes if you want me to. But when you look at software engineering, right, a bunch of papers get published, but people just use the building blocks of the React toolbox or the Rust toolbox or whatever. I think these boxes of information that you can build on top of are so interesting to the world. And I think biology has the same potential, or we're just way behind in that whole development. I think the decentralized research is super interesting. It's something that we also that's part of the product that we sell, is that all the data that you get as a company, you can use that internally at your company, which means that if you have hundreds of different sites, you have hundreds of different researchers, everything that they're doing is contributing to the company as a whole. It's all being poured into this one data lake that a company can then dive into and start exploring and then use that data for something different. And I think my favorite thing is discovering companies doing the same research in multiple different locations, but not knowing about it. And then Reshape is a platform that actually gives you that insight that they were just replicating things right now.
Where do you see things going? Because you talked about this idea of opening stuff up. If you were to look 10 years in the future, do you see every major CPG brand having massive AI capabilities, or is it going to be more a situation where they outsource it? I'm just kind of curious where you see the food world going with regards to AI.
Yeah, I think most of them right now are trying to like in-house it. So like develop, like get their own data set and then build their own AI models. And I think that is going to be their competitive advantage over time. It is what data do you have? How robust is it? And then what models do you have to build the next great products? I think that's going to be their long-term competitive advantage. I think
I want to put a pin on that. I want to come back to it. But so if you look at traditional food brands, they develop consumer-facing brands where they have this brand equity, whether that's Nestle or Coca-Cola, McDonald's, or whatever, and they're known for certain flavors and recipes, etc. But as we move forward, do you think these food brands are going to have to be more nimble, and like the consumer-facing brand equity matters less because they're going to have to just reformulate everything? I don't know if I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but I'm just kind of curious how do you balance the consumer brand equity with the war chest of knowledge and information in AI that they can reformulate new products around?
I think like the brand is still going to be like number one, right? But I do think like brands are also evolving over time, and I think so are the consumer needs. I think now more than ever, we are seeing a stronger pull from consumers to have like better, healthier, safer products. And I think that is going to be like a core part of like what are you buying in the future? And consumers are also more conscious about where are they getting stuff from. I think just as you've seen a massive uptake in sustainability or getting products that have been sourced through, I forgot the word for it, but through nicer means has become like major selling points. I think so will having safer and healthier products even more than they are today. I think right now we have a bit of a crude understanding of it. Like it's very focused around like what's the protein contents or those kind of things. But I think diving into the ingredient list will become much more important. You'll start to have these like clean labels that sell you like all natural products, and we have a perfect score when it comes to food health and safety. I think those are going to be some of the important drivers of the future. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. You have some big clients that have come in, and it seems like you've probably had some momentum over the last 6 months. Can you characterize some of these conversations? If you can't name names, but at least tell us like what are they coming to you asking? Hey, we need help. We need to think about our formulas, etc.
Yeah. So I think there's like a few different kinds of buckets here. So the first one is we see a lot of like the big FMCG companies coming in because they want to get strong data on the things that are still very physical and very manual today. I think that's a core problem that we solve. So whenever you move towards actually like testing your product in like real formulations or stuff like that, you need the real data. And can I name? Probably not. What we see from these companies is like they want to standardize how they do data capturing across their entire company. And these companies are not small ones. They are more than 50,000 employees. So these are massive corporations. They have they have thousands of scientists whose job is to analyze and inspect different experiments. They want to standardize how that's done. That I think is the big one coming in. Secondly, we're seeing a big push towards ensuring the safety of the food that they send out and the health and safety around that. So we haven't seen like that many major cases in the last few years, but I think cases like salmonella, listeria, just the safety in your food production, right? I believe right now in the US, you have a whole chicken situation going on where the safety of our products is so vital today. And it's going to become a major, like, it's both like, right now it's supposed to be a brand liability, but I think it's going to become a brand asset in the future as well, that you produce clean and healthy foods. So that's another big bucket. There's very much focused on like quality control of foods. It's focused on making sure that the ingredients you get in are clean. And we're getting quite a large pull from that. And that's also the new product that we just launched. I think
it doesn't seem like these are small initiatives. These are like, when you talk about refashioning and redoing the way you do research to where there's standardization across a 50,000 person food company to make sure that it's done the same way, et cetera. You guys are getting entrenched and probably deep, and this is like company wide. These are big projects, it sounds like.
Yeah. So quite big projects. And I think the good part is that if we do this well, these companies will be set up to basically take the lead on developing new products in the future. Like they will be the ones who have the data that's necessary to make AI models that actually work. So it's an incredibly exciting time right now. With the whole, right now we need to be sure that we spend our money wisely and we get products out there efficiently. I think bringing automation and utilizing AI for what it's great at, it's becoming more of a top of mind issue.
It's interesting to me that you said that these big food companies are wanting to bring this AI expertise in-house? Because it seems like a lot of them initially, like 3 or 4 years ago, were maybe a little bit skeptical, but definitely curious. It definitely didn't seem like they had like the internal like muscle built to do this. That's why I think like a Kraft Heinz partnered up with like Notcode, because they didn't really necessarily think that they had it, or maybe they just thought, hey, this is a smart move because these guys are early adopters. So you think that these companies are investing in computer scientists and building AI teams so they have this muscle?
Yeah, I think like 5 years ago when we started, it was very rare to see like actual data scientists or computer scientists inside of these companies. And nowadays it is much more prevalent. But I do think there is a big divide here where also, as I mentioned at the beginning, right, you have some companies that are much more like Silicon Valley and some that are more like Germany. So I think we're starting to see
fax machines, using fax machines.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're starting to see like a bigger divide. And I think that divide will also be visible in the markets probably in like 5 or 10 years. Because it does take time to get new products out there. But I think this major discrepancy is so interesting as well. Because some companies get it. And there are some really cool initiatives happening. I believe Unilever just launched the Data Lab, which is an incredibly exciting project. So I think they understand. I think ChatGPT did a great job at showing the true capabilities of AI, right? So I think that, coupled with the fact that we can now make new really awesome products and there's much more pressure from both consumers and regulatory, I think that has really pushed a lot of these companies to the next stage.
It's interesting because, I mean, we all who have been in the space of food and been following kind of old school machine learning for a while know that that's been around a decade or more. We've seen it being used. But you're right. ChatGPT really kind of opened people's eyes to wow, the magic of things like large language models. This is very transformative. I guess it was just easier to wrap your mind around once you saw the power of an LLM.
Yeah, I think like the big aha moment as well is like when you think about ChatGPT and you look at what was necessary to make it, it is like they scraped like everything available on the entire internet. If you told me that 10 years ago, I would say like you're mad. Like nobody has done that. That seems insane to have actually done. But the market and the company that was built out of doing that is astronomical. Like it is wild. It's just like how fast it was done. And I think that really opened up companies to understand like the fact that this is possible if you have vast amount of data is so interesting to them. And it also means like this is why they're interested in investing, is because they now understand that if we just gather all the data that we're actually generating at our company, we could probably build the equivalent of that for food, for personal care, for ingredients, for industrial biotech. And I think now that race is like fully begun.
I've heard a few people speculate or talk about, people on LinkedIn saying, hey, should I do this? Build like the ChatGPT for food, like essentially vertical focused knowledge around an industry or whatever. So let me ask you, is that what you're doing? Or is the space race on for kind of vertically focused models and whoever owns that has power?
I think this is a really hard question because I think a lot of these companies are going to do it internally. So I think they can leverage a lot of the knowledge that we have that other companies have. I think they're going to try to build it internally. I mean, when you look at these companies, right, Unilever has 180,000 employees or something. Pepsi has probably more than 100,000 as well. These companies are so massive and they have so many researchers that even if you like collect all the academic research institutions, you're still not probably going to be, close to having the same like cannon power as these companies. So I think it's going to be internal for these food companies for a long time. And I think they're, whoever gets the lead here will be able to get like super fast products out. They'll be able to respond to consumer needs or requests, almost instantaneously. And I think whoever manages to build the ChatGPT for food will have a huge advantage.
One of my friends, he's a podcaster on the Spoon Podcast Network. Mike Lee does great work. He's a futurist. If you don't know him, you should definitely check out his work. But he does this really great future casting where he looks 10, 20, 30 years in the future and uses narrative storytelling to possibly paint a picture of what the world may be like with these new technologies. Kind of almost Black Mirror meets industry analysis. And he did one around AI and food and talked about this idea of building the perfect sandwich. And like once you start to use this AI that is really, really smart, you can make food that almost is like super addictive. And he talked about this idea of making a sandwich that no one could resist. Maybe there's a CPG brand that can do this in 10, 20 years. And I don't know if we necessarily want to get into the ethics of it, but it sounds like this is something that like maybe future we could be moving towards. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think taste probably matters a lot here. So that's definitely got to have like an impact. But whenever I think about Reshape and I think about the future, I always try to like think 100 years into the future. Like what is definitely going to be true? And I think what's definitely going to be true is that we have a massive understanding of all the different microbes in the world and how they affect our products. I think we're going to have a much better way of understanding how and what food tastes like given different things. And I think engineering something to taste in a certain way will be really easy. That should just be like, I want it to taste like this. We need a whole vocabulary for like how do you describe taste well, right? But I'm sure there's going to be like a reverse engineering way of doing that, where we just say like, this is the result I want, make it through natural means.
One of the big things I saw at Future Food Tech about a month ago when I was there was a lot of the conversation has moved from, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, is all about protein maxing, and it's all about like creating alternative proteins through things like cultivated big bioreactors to grow meat cells. But it seems like the conversation has moved a lot more towards like fiber and like the brain gut axis, and how we can just like help people eat better and get better health outcomes and microbiome, et cetera. So is that part of what you're hearing when you're talking to some of these food brands? They want to leverage AI to maybe create products that can better feed the gut, can create maybe better outcomes for people who are using GLP-1s, et cetera. Is this part of the conversation is in the ether when you're talking to people?
I'd say so, but it's I think this is where it starts to get a little bit hairy, right? Because I also have to be wary of how much I can share.
Your NDAs, I understand.
We have a lot.
Yeah.
I think generally the big pulse from consumers right now is like, you want natural, healthy foods that are like truly healthy. And I think fiber is definitely like an important part of it. And simultaneously, we're also seeing a massive growth in like prebiotic, postbiotics, any way of like ensuring that your gut microbiome is healthy. And I think right now we're in the baby steps phase still. But as far as I see it, this is going to be a massive market that'll be booming. I think if you just look at something like, I think the whole prebiotic kombucha explosion was like phase 0. And I think the next one is like, how do you get this into your food in a more healthy manner? So I definitely think there's going to be a big area in the future.
Yeah, it's an exciting area. I mean, there's companies like One Bio that are basically trying to say, hey, how can we put this prebiotic fiber into things like Coca-Cola or your oatmeal or whatever, to kind of help you have better gut health, et cetera. But before we let you go, how did you get into this line of work? What did you go to school for? Was this something you thought you'd be doing 20 years ago when you were going undergrad?
20 years ago? I mean, I'm only like 31.
Okay. So we don't have to go back to when you're 11, but how about when you're 18? Did you think you'd be doing this?
No, so I actually started out studying in med school. I did about 6 months and I thought that was incredibly boring. So I quit that, did physics, then I did mechanical engineering. I wanted to build rockets. So that was my long-term thing, right? But I think, seeing SpaceX do a bunch of incredible things, I thought I just got like really curious about like what avenues of the world are there. And I think the world of biology is this extremely underappreciated area, right? Where, we all went to high school, we all had biology class, and we learned the classical, like the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and nobody cares. Like, it is the most boring thing you've ever heard about in the entire world. Then I read this really cool essay by a guy called James Somers, who has this, he has a quote in there. Let's see if I can find it. It's an essay called "I Should Have Loved Biology," because I think biology is like so interesting, but nobody like really explained it to me in a way where it actually sounds interesting. And he has this quote in here where it says, "Imagine a flashy spaceship lands in your backyard. The door opens and you're invited to investigate to see what you can learn. The technology is clearly millions of years beyond what we can make. This is biology." It's by a guy called Bert Hubert, but I think this really like encompasses it, right? Biology is so complex. It's like the most complex piece of technology in the entire world. We have like nothing that's remotely close. You start from one cell and then you grow into a Michael Wolff who's now hosting a podcast together with me. Like that is crazy, right? When you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And, almost everything that lives today is biology, right? Like all the humans, all the trees, all the plants. And the fact that we basically just have like the ciphers and the code for the different things. We have a DNA sequence for you, and that describes what you are and what you become to be. And I think that translation between like there's a line of code and then something happens in the physical world that keeps growing and regenerating. Like we have nothing that's close to that, right? Like we don't have cars we can like scratch and then it just regrows a scar on top of it. We have nothing we have ChatGPT that's getting close to like inventing things, right? But biology is so crazily cool. And I think what we're working at Reshape is finding ways where we can start deciphering, like, what does the DNA sequence do? How can we understand that and then interpret that in the real world? And I think my long-term ambition is building the link between the two. So how do you interpret what happens in the real world, and how do you then start making that?
So you want to crack the code on what this amazing thing called biology is and how we can understand the digital tools and then translate that into real world biology.
Yeah. And I think, you started me on a track here, so I'm just giving you a bit of a heads up. But basically, like, if you think about the fact that the human lifespan went from like 6 years on average in 1900s to like 80 today, the change mostly happened because we invented artificial fertilizer. But since then, it has increased, but so slowly. The fact that we still have foodborne illnesses killing a bunch of people seems crazy to me. Like, for that, we definitely have the tools today to do something about it. The fact that we still get infected by a bunch of other diseases and we still have cancer, like, why do we have to succumb to the dragon that basically kills all people at one point?
It's an exciting future. And Carl, I'm really excited to see how you guys grow. This has been a lot of fun learning about what you're building. So thanks for spending some time with us. Where can people find out more about what you're building?
You can check out our website, or otherwise we're active on stuff like LinkedIn and Twitter. Just search up Reshape Biotech and we should be the first thing that pops up.
That was my conversation with Carl-Emil Grøn, who I think was a super interesting guy and has some great ideas about the future of how AI can help us in the lab, accelerating discovery within biotech. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know I did. If you haven't already subscribed to some of our other podcasts on the Spoon Podcast Network, please do so now. Go to Spoon, check out podcasts on the top, and subscribe to some of these great shows. We'll really appreciate it, and I think you'll be glad that you did. All right, folks, we'll talk to you soon.